What's up guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Yejide, and if it's your first time stopping by, you're welcome. So in today's episode I'm going to be showing us how I made this beautiful ruched dress. So if this is something you're interested in, please keep watching. So guys, the first thing you want to know when making a ruched dress is that you want to make the bottom part, that's the skirt part, you want to make it in an A-line form. If you make it in a straight skirt form, it's going to bulge at the back. So guys, without further ado, let's get started. So this is the material I'm going to be using. I got about 2.5 yards of this beautiful material, and we are going to be drafting the patterns on a pattern paper before transferring to the main fabric. So I'm going to be drafting the top part first. So this, my pattern paper is unfold, and this part here is the shoulder line. So guys, starting from the shoulder line, I'm going to mark the bust line, which is 10.5 inches, the under bust, which is 14.5, and the half length, which is 17 inches. And I'm going to mark this at another point so as to get a straight horizontal line. I'll just connect this point like so. Then I'll take my shoulder measurement divided by 2. The shoulder is 14.5, so I took 7.25, and I came down by 1 inch for my shoulder slope. So for the neck wideness, I'm going to be using 3.5 inches, and for the neck depth, I'm going to be using 1.5 inch. Don't forget that this has a turtleneck. So guys, I'm just going to connect both neck measurements together, and I'm going to make a little curve like so. Then I'll also connect my shoulder slope back into the neckline. So the next thing I'm going to take now is going to be my armhole. So on my bust line, I'm going to mark the shoulder measurements, and from there I'll come up by 2 inches. That is how to get your armhole. So I'll come up by 2 inches and connect that in a straight line back to the shoulder line. Then I'll extend this line here also. Then I'll come in from the shoulder line. I'll divide what I have on the shoulder line into 2. I'll mark the midpoint, and from that midpoint I'm going to come in by 0.5 inch. You know, this is the front pattern, so you want to make your armhole a little bit shallow so as to accommodate the bust. Then I'll just use my armhole curve to connect the points together. Then this is the chest line, then the bust line, the under bust, and also the waistline. So now guys, I'm just going to take the bust circumference divided by 4. The bust I'm working with is 37 divided by 4. I have about 9.25, and I'm going to add 1.5 inches as my seam allowance. Then the under bust is 30 divided by 4. I went ahead to mark 7, and I added same sewing allowance. The same thing with the waist. I'll take the waist measurement divided by 4, and I'll add 1.5 inches sewing allowance. So guys, the next thing I'm going to do now is mark the nipple to nipple measurement divided by 2 on the waistline, the under bust line, and also the bust line. So the nipple to nipple is 8 divided by 2, so I went ahead to mark 4 inches, and I just connected the 3 lines. So on the waistline guys, I'm going to come in by 0.5 inches on both sides for my dart, and I'll connect that back to the bust line. So I'll measure what I have on the under bust, that's the dart allowance. I have about 0.75 inches. I'm going to add that back to the measurement I've taken earlier. Then the waist, I'm going to measure the dart allowance I have. This is 1 inch. I'm going to add this back so as not to shorten my measurement, and I'll just connect all the points together. So guys, we are done with the front pattern. I'm just going to cut this out. I'm going to be using this pattern to also cut out the back pattern. So this is the front pattern guys. So now the next thing we are going to cut is the down part, that's the skirt part. So guys, the full length of this skirt is 40 inches, and the half length is 17 inches. So if you subtract 17 inches from 40, we have 23 inches. That's the length of this skirt. So from the waistline, I just went to mark my hip line, which is 8 inches, and you can see I've gone ahead to mark 25 inches. the skirt length is 23 inches and 2-inch seam allowance. So you can see from 17 inches, you can see what I have here. I have 42 inches, 40-inch for the length of the skirt and 2-inch for seam allowance. So from my waist, I just went in by 4 inches, which is my nipple to nipple measurement, and on that line I've gone ahead to take my dart measurement, which is 0.5 inches on both sides, and the dart length I took is 3 inches. So now on the waist, I'm going to mark the waist circumference divided by 4, that is 7 inch, and I'll add back the dart measurement, which is 1 inches. Then I'll add 1.5 inches as my seam allowance. Then I'll just rule out this hip line so I can easily identify it. Then I'll mark my hip circumference divided by 4. This is 40 divided by 4, that's 10 inches. Then I'll add 1 inch, which is going to serve as ease for the hip line, and I'll add 1.5 inches, which is going to serve as the seam allowance. So guys, just like I explained earlier, you don't want to make this a straight skirt, because if you make this straight, by the time you draw your string, it's going to bulge at the back. So you want to make this very free at the hem of the skirt. So what I'll do is, from the waist measurement I have, I'm just going to extend this in an A-line form. I'm not going to make this straight. So you can see what I'm doing. Just draw this down in a flay manner, like so. Then this is the hem of the skirt, the full length. So guys, we are done with this down part. I'm just going to cut this out, and I'm also going to use this to cut the back part of the skirt. So you can see the front part and the down part. If you do this very well, you will see that your darts would align on both upper part and lower part of the patterns. So now the next thing I'm going to do is, I'm going to use these patterns to cut out on my fabric. So this is the skirt part. You can see what I'm doing. I'm just going to cut this out. There's no need to add any allowance to this, as I have done that already when cutting on the pattern. So now to cut out the back part, don't forget to add your zipper allowance. You can go ahead to add 1 inch or 1.5 inches, depends on what you want. Then at the hem of the skirt, you can see that the 1 inch for the zipper allowance is not complete. This is because I don't want that part to bulge. So at the end of the skirt, I have ½ inch as the zipper allowance here, since the zipper is not going to get to this point, so there's no need to waste material here. So this, I've gone ahead to cut the front part for the upper part of this style. So I'm just going to use that same pattern to cut out for the back. Then don't forget to also add your zipper allowance. I'm gonna add to add 1 inch zipper allowance. Then the armhole for the back is not as shallow as the front, so just draw that out. Then I'm just going to go ahead now to trace out this pattern for the back parts. Then I'm just going to go ahead now to slit the zipper allowance for the back parts of the upper part of this style. So we are done cutting out the patterns, guys. The next thing we are going to do now is to sew. So now for the skirt part, guys, let's start with the front part of the skirt. Once you get your nipple to nipple measurements, so depending on where you want your drawstring to be placed, so I want this to be placed on the right. So on the nipple to nipple measurements on the right, I'm just going to draw a straight line from the beginning of the skirt to the down parts. Then go ahead to take the measurement of the skirt. So here I have 25 inches. So now for the string casing, I'm going to cut 24 inches instead of 25. The remaining 1 inch will be to fold the end of the skirt. Then this string, you can see it is 3 inches wide. So make it 3 inches wide, and the length of your skirt, subtract 1 inch from that. So I'll just place that string case on the nipple to nipple measurement I have on the skirt part. So just like I said, I want this on the right. So I'm just going to draw a straight line from the beginning of the skirt to the end of the skirt, so as to guide me when placing my string casing. So you can see, then I'll just place the string casing on it. So you don't want to make your string casing the full length of your skirt, you can see, so that you still have about 1 inch to fold the hem of the skirt. You can see what I'm doing. So now guys, I'm just going to fold the ends of this string casing and I'll sew this down with a straight stitch. So let's go ahead to do that now. So the first thing I did was to iron down the side so as to be able to sew easily. So I'll just take this to my sewing machine now and sew down on both sides of this string casing. I'll also fold down the end of the string casing. So I'm gonna have to use my office pin to hold this down. So guys, I'm just using my office pins to hold down the edges of this string casing so as to enable me sew this down easily. So you can also go ahead to do this. It will make your work easier. Then don't forget to iron the edges of the string casing and run a straight stitch on each side. So this is it. I'm gonna add to do that. So guys, the next thing we are going to do is to divide this casing into 3 parts. So now that we've sewn the edges, both edges, I'm going to run a straight stitch in the middle so I can have 2 panels for my string to pass through. So here it is guys, I've gone ahead to sew down the middle. So now I have 2 panels and you can see my string casing length is 24 inches. So now for your whatever you have as the length of your skirt, make sure when you are cutting your string you multiply that by 2. So since I have about 25 inches for the length of this skirt, you can see my string is like 50 inches long. Then what I'll do is, and it is about 1.5 inches wide. So now the next thing I'm going to do is just fold the edges. You can see I'm about to make my string. So now fold the edges like so and fold this one more time to cover it up and run a straight stitch on it. This is not the easiest job to do, but just go ahead to do it so as to make your strings. So I'm gonna add to make 2 of these. Each one will be on each side of the string casing I've made. So now I'm going to make use of a safety pin to pass these strings into my string casing. You can see what I'm doing. This is very easy to do. Just make use of a pin to pass your string into your string casing. So you can see I'm done with one and it is out already. I'm going to go ahead now to do the same thing to the other string. Don't forget that we have 2 string casings. So now once that is done, I'm going to arrange my string in place and I'll make sure they are at the beginning of this skirt. Then the next thing I'm going to do now is to sew down on the strings I have so as to hold them in place. So you can see I'm gonna have to run a straight stitch on the strings at the waist of the skirt. So you can see by the time you draw your string, if you keep drawing your string back and forth, it won't come out. So just go ahead to sew this down at the waist of the skirt. So we are done with this front part. So now guys, the next thing I'm going to do is to work on the upper part of this style. So from the middle of the front part, I'm just going to place the back and the front together so as to take my darts together. So I'll mark my nipple to nipple measurement, which is 4 inches, and I'm going to notch all the pieces together. Then the front part of this style, you can see the dart is 5 inches long for the front, and for the back you can see the dart is 6 inches. So I just went ahead to measure the dart together, so from my notch it would help me. So now on the waistline for the back, I'm going to come in by ½ inch and I'm going to cut that out. This is so as to prevent the zip from bulging, and I'll just blend this into the bust line area. So I'll go ahead to notch my zipper area on the back and here. So you can see guys, I'm gonna ahead to take my darts for the front and back patterns. I've also gonna ahead to iron them, so you can see them looking very fine. So now the next thing I'm going to do now is to place the front part on the back part and I'll join the shoulders together. You can see. So here it is, guys. I've gone ahead to join the shoulders. You can see what it looks like. So now the next thing is to measure what I have on my neck from front to back. So now on this neck area, you can see I have about 17 inches. So now to cut the turtleneck, you can see it is 2 inches wide on fold, and when you open it up it is 4 inches, and I measured about 19 inches for the length, so as to give me a little bit of excess so I can trim very well. So now, guys, the next thing I'm going to do, you can see this is 2 inches. I'm going to iron a facing to this, and I'm going to iron down both edges. You can see what I've gone ahead to do. I've ironed down a stay to this, and I've ironed the edges also. This is so as to make my sewing easy when I'm about to sew. So just go ahead to iron down both edges with a little inch, you can see. So now from the wrong side of this upper part, just place your turtleneck on it like so, and I'm going to use my office pins to hold this down. Then I'll sew on that ½ inch I ironed earlier. I'll sew this down to the wrong side of this material. You can see what I'm doing. So guys, I've gone ahead to sew down the ½ inch that I ironed, and I'm just going to trim out this excess I have here so that it will prevent the neck area from bulging. So now the next thing is to use the remainder of this turtleneck to cover what I've sewn earlier. So that is why it is important for you to iron down the edges so it can be easy for you, and it can also make your work neat. So this is it. I've gone ahead to sew down, and I've also gone ahead to iron. So now, guys, the next thing I'm going to do is just to arrange the front and the back materials together, and I'm going to hold down the zip allowance on the back. Then I've gone ahead to take my measurement, and I'll sew down by 1.5 inches that I left as seam allowance. So guys, that is it. I've gone ahead to sew down, and I've also gone ahead to iron down the sides. So now this is the down part of the skirt. For the back, so I'm just going to take my dart. The dart length for the back part of this skirt is 5 inches, so there's no need to take dart on the front part. You can just go ahead to take dart on the other parts of the skirt. You can see what I have here. You know you have a drawstring on one part, so go ahead to take the dart on the other parts. So now, guys, I'll just arrange the back pieces on the front pieces, and I would hold the zip allowance down with my office pins so that I can sew down the sides. So I'll just go ahead now to take the measurement I have again, and I'll take the waist measurement. Then the remainder of the allowance, I'll split it on both ends of this skirt. Then I'll take my hip line, which is 8 inches. Then I'll take the hip circumference measurement divided by 2, and I'll do the same thing just like I did for the waist. I'll divide the remainder of the measurements on both sides. Then on the hip circumference, guys, don't forget to add 1 inch for ease. You don't want that hip area to be very tight. You know, this is a little bit of a free dress on the down part. So from the hip circumference that I've taken, I'll just rule down a straight line to the end of this skirt, and I'll go ahead now to sew down on this chalked area that I've marked. I'll also sew down the middle part, which is the zipper allowance area. So here it is, guys. You can see what the down part of this skirt looks like, of this dress rather looks like. You can see it is coming out very beautiful. So you can see I have not even joined the upper part, and you can see the drawstring looking beautiful already. So now, guys, don't forget on the lower part, on the back part of this skirt or dress, don't forget to leave your zipper allowance, and I left about 7 inches length on the back. I didn't finish sewing that middle. I hope you understand what I'm saying here. So now the next thing I'm going to do is to join the front part to the down part, the upper part to the down part. So to make this easier, just go ahead to notch the middle of the upper part and do the same thing for the lower part. So I'll place the notches on each other like so, and I'll sew down on each side of this material by 1/2 inch. Then I'll make sure that the seams on the sides are aligned on each other. I'll do the same thing for the back. So guys, I've gone ahead to sew the upper part to the lower part. You can see what it looks like. So this dress is coming out beautiful already and I'm loving it. So now the next thing is to place the zipper on the zipper allowance. So I'll just hold my zipper down with the zipper allowance I've created on the upper part and the lower part. So here it is, guys. I've gone ahead to join my zipper. You can see what it looks like. So now the next thing is to fix our armhole, but before you do that, make sure to trim your armhole to the armhole circumference. So now guys, the length of the sleeve I'm working with is 22 inches and I've gone ahead to add 2 inches. So now you can see this length is 24 inches. So I'll just go ahead now to create my elastic casing. I'll fold the hem of my sleeve twice to create my elastic casing. So guys, this is not a basic sleeve or anything. I just went ahead to cut out a rectangular shaped fabric and I just measured the length of the sleeve, and this is because I want to gather the armhole part to my armhole that I have on the dress. So guys, I've gone ahead to pass my elastic into my elastic casing and I've sewed this down by 1/2 inch. So once I turn this out, I'm just going to be joining this. I'm going to be sewing this down to my armhole and I'm going to do this to the other side of this material, of this dress rather. So this is very easy to do. So how to get the wideness of this sleeve I've created, just measure your wrist and multiply that by 2 or 3 depending on how full you want the sleeve to be. So I'll do this to the other sleeve, guys, and this is basically the end of this tutorial. So if you have any questions for me, let me know in the comment section below. So guys, you can see this is the end result. Please don't forget to like and also subscribe. I'm going to see you all in my next video. Bye.